It wasn't curiosity or desire, just a brief, careless moment that lingered far longer in my memory than it ever should have. Life has a way of ignoring intentions. It moves quickly, without warning, and sometimes one unguarded second is enough to change everything, leaving you to wonder how something so small could carry such weight. Before we continue, let us know where in the world you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories reach. My name is Samuel Reed, and for the last 3 years, my world has centered around one person alone, my daughter, Emma. That Saturday morning at Clearwater Beach was supposed to be simple. No work, no pressure, just sun, sand, and the sound of Emma's laughter carried by the wind. The Florida heat pressed down relentlessly, the sky a clear, endless blue. I wiped sweat from my forehead as I tried to keep up with Emma, who darted ahead of me like she had springs in her legs. "Daddy, you're too slow," she called back, her laughter bright and unfiltered. "I'm conserving energy," I said, pretending not to be out of breath. "Smart people do that." She giggled and ran back toward the water, her small footprints quickly erased by the tide. Watching her like that carefree happy filled my chest with a quiet mix of gratitude and ache. Gratitude because she was healthy and smiling. Ache because there was a time when I wasn't sure I could give her even that. 3 years earlier, my life had cracked open in a way I never expected. My marriage didn't end with shouting or dramatic scenes. It ended with silence, with distance, with the realization that we wanted different futures. Emma's mother left for California with someone new, leaving behind a life that suddenly felt unfinished. I became a single father overnight, learning on the fly how to be both strong and gentle, both provider and comfort. Emma didn't complain. She adapted faster than I did. She trusted me completely, and that trust became my greatest responsibility. She knelt in the sand a few feet away, already focused on building something new. Her brows furrowed in concentration as she packed wet sand into a bucket and flipped it over carefully. "Daddy, look," she said proudly. I crouched beside her. "That's incredible," I said honestly. "He might be the best sandcastle builder on this entire beach." Her smile widened, the kind that made everything else fade into the background. I spread out our blanket nearby and anchored the umbrella deep into the sand. Saturdays like this were rare. Working as a senior graphic designer at Horizon Marketing meant long hours and even longer expectations. Most weekends were swallowed by revisions and presentations. My phone usually buzzed non-stop that day. It didn't know emails, no missed calls, no urgent messages. I checked it again, just to be sure. Still nothing. A small, relieved smile tugged at my lips. My boss, Hazel Montgomery, wasn't known for respecting personal time. She was brilliant, relentless, and demanding in a way that pushed everyone around her to their limits. At 35, she had built Horizon from the ground up, transforming it into one of Chicago's most respected boutique agencies. People admired her drive. They feared her standards. I respected her deeply. I also found her intimidating in a way that made my chest tighten every time she walked past my desk. "Can we get ice cream?" Emma asked suddenly, abandoning her mid-construction. "After lunch," I said, reaching into the cooler. "Something real first." She sighed dramatically, but joined me under the umbrella. As she took a bite of her sandwich, I scanned the crowded beach absently, my mind finally free of deadlines and layouts. That's when I saw her. At first, my brain refused to connect the image with the woman I knew. She stood closer to the shoreline, barefoot, her posture relaxed, laughing openly with another woman who looked strikingly similar. Her dark hair fell loosely around her shoulders, moved by the breeze instead of pinned back in the severe bun I was used to seeing. It took a moment to register. That was Hazel. Out of her suits, out of her heels, out of the role she played so flawlessly at work. She looked human. I looked away instinctively. The last thing I wanted was to cross paths with my boss on my only free day. I didn't want to talk about campaigns or timelines, while Emma built sandcastles a few feet away. "Daddy, who's that?" Emma asked, following my gaze. "Someone from work," I muttered, suddenly very interested in unwrapping napkins. But curiosity has a way of undoing good intentions. Glanced back, and the universe chose that exact moment to remind me how cruel timing could be. Hazel adjusted her beach wrap, shifting her stance slightly. A sudden gust of wind caught the fabric, lifting it away from her body. For one frozen heartbeat, she was exposed from the waist up. Our eyes met. Shock flashed across her face. sharp and unmistakable. Recognition followed just as quickly. Then embarrassment, deep, vivid, impossible to miss. My stomach dropped. I looked away immediately, my face burning as if the sun itself had turned its focus on me. That was it. I was certain of it. I had just ruined my career with one unfortunate glance. "Daddy, your face is all red," Emma observed calmly. "It's just the heat," I lied, my voice tighter than I wanted it to be. I considered packing everything up and leaving without a word. Maybe if I disappeared quickly enough, the moment would fade. Maybe Monday wouldn't be as bad as I imagined. Then a shadow fell across our blanket. Mr. Reed. My heart jumped. I looked up slowly. Hazel Montgomery stood there, now fully covered, sunglasses resting on top of her head. Up close, without makeup and formal clothes, she looked younger, softer, and somehow more intimidating in her own way. "I'm sorry," I blurted out, standing too quickly. "I didn't mean to." She raised a hand, stopping me. "Hazel," she said calmly, "when we're not at the office." Her gaze shifted to Emma, who looked up at her with open curiosity. "And who might this be?" Hazel asked. "I'm Emma," my daughter said proudly, extending her hand. "I'm 7 3/4." Hazel smiled as she shook Emma's hand, her expression softening in a way I'd never seen before. "That's a very impressive age," she said warmly. "This is my boss," I exclaimed awkwardly, feeling my ears burn. "The one who sends messages when we're watching movies?" Emma asked innocently. Hazel lifted an eyebrow, and I briefly wondered if the sand might actually swallow me whole. "Sometimes work feels urgent," Hazel said after a pause, "even when it probably shouldn't." There was a brief silence, broken only by the sound of waves and distant laughter. Then Emma held up her sandwich. "Do you want one?" she asked. "Daddy cuts the crusts off." Hazel hesitated, just for a second. Then, to my complete surprise, she sat down on the edge of our blanket. "That actually sounds nice," she said. And just like that, the woman who in Timonder's entire conference rooms accepted a peanut butter and jelly sandwich from my daughter. Something shifted in the air, subtle but undeniable. I didn't know it yet, but that moment, simple, awkward, unexpected, was only the beginning. For a few seconds after Hazel sat down, none of us spoke. Emma took that as permission to talk enough for all three of us. "My daddy makes the best sandwiches," she said proudly. "He always cuts the crusts off because I don't like them." Hazel smiled as she took a careful bite. "Then your daddy clearly understands priorities." I let out a quiet breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Somehow, the awkward tension I expected never arrived. Instead, there was something softer in the space between us, uncertain, but not uncomfortable. "My sister had to take a work call," Hazel explained, gesturing toward the woman pacing near the water, with a phone pressed to her ear. "Insisted we come out today." "Work emergencies follow you everywhere," I said lightly. Hazel's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "Some bosses are unreasonable that way." Cliff caught me off guard. It almost sounded like self-awareness, maybe even humor. Emma finished her sandwich and hopped to her feet. "Daddy raises me all by himself," she announced proudly, as if Hazel had just earned her trust. "My mom lives in California." "Emma," I said gently, unsure how much I wanted to share with my boss, but Hazel didn't look uncomfortable. She looked thoughtful. "I didn't know you were a single parent," she said quietly. "It explains a lot." "Explains what?" I asked. "Well, you look like you haven't slept in years," she said matter-of-factly, "and why you're the only senior designer who never stays for after-work drinks." I shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. Babysitters are expensive, and Emma needs consistency. Hazel nodded slowly, her gaze drifting toward Emma, who had already returned to her sandcastle, completely absorbed again. "My father raised me and my sister alone," Hazel said after a moment. "Our mother passed away when we were young." The admission stunned me. Hazel never talked about her personal life at work. Her past was a locked door no one dared knock on. "It's not easy," I said quietly. "No," she agreed, "but it shapes you." There was something unspoken between us, then a shared understanding that didn't need elaboration. Hazel shifted slightly, then spoke again. "About earlier. The wind, I mean." My stomach tightened. "I'm really sorry," I said quickly. "It was an accident. I didn't mean to." She shook her head gently. "Beach wraps are unreliable. Let's forget it." Relief washed through me so fast it almost made me dizzy. "Thank you," I said. She watched Emma for a moment, then turned back to me. "How do you do it?" Do what? Balance everything. Work, parenthood, life. The question caught me off guard. Hazel Montgomery asking me for advice felt surreal. Honestly, I said, not very well sometimes. There are days when I feel like I'm failing at everything. Being a dad, meeting deadlines, keeping the house from falling apart. She listened closely, not interrupting. But then there are moments like this. I continued, nodding toward Emma, and it all feels worth it. Hazel nodded slowly. I admire that. Emma suddenly ran over, holding a handful of shells. Do you want to help with my castle? She asked Hazel. I started to intervene, but Hazel was already standing. I'd be honored, she said. What followed felt unreal. For the next half hour, Hazel Montgomery knelt in the sand beside my daughter, helping her build towers and moats with intense focus. She suggested reinforcing walls, adding shells for decoration, and smoothing edges with careful precision. She approached sandcastle, building the same way she approached client work, with seriousness and commitment. And she smiled the entire time, a real smile. Not the polite kind she wore at work, but something warmer, lighter. I watched them from the blanket, something unfamiliar stirring in my chest. When Hazel's sister finally returned, looking apologetic, Hazel introduced us. This is Samuel Reed, she said, one of our senior designers, and this is his daughter Emma, the one whose work you praised last week. Her sister asked with a curious smile. Hazel shot her a look. He's very talented. Daddy draws pictures for computers, Emma explained helpfully. Her sister laughed. That's a perfect description. As they prepared to leave, Hazel hesitated. The Henderson presentation on Monday, she said. You don't need to come in early. The client pushed it to Wednesday. Oh, I said, surprised. Thank you. She nodded, then added, we should also discuss adjusting your schedule. If you're managing everything alone, flexibility might help. I stared at her, speechless. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, she said, turning to Emma. Your sandcastle is very impressive. You can come see it again, Emma offered generously. Hazel smiled. I'd like that. As they walked away, Hazel's sister leaned close and whispered something that made Hazel laugh softly. I like your boss, Emma said. Returning to her castle, I watched Hazel disappear into the crowd. My thoughts tangled. So do I said quietly. Monday morning arrived faster than I expected. The usual chaos of school bags and rushed breakfasts filled our small apartment. I dropped Emma off and headed to work, bracing myself for awkwardness. When I reached my desk, a small package waited. Inside was a tiny glass sandcastle, intricately crafted, along with a note. Some structures are worth building carefully. I looked up instinctively. Hazel stood in her office doorway, watching me. She gave a small nod before turning back to her computer. Something had changed. Over the next few weeks, the changes were subtle but meaningful. Hazel introduced flexible schedules for parents. Meetings shifted earlier. When Emma caught the flu and I worked from home for several days, Hazel personally adjusted project timelines without complaint. Sometimes, when I stayed late, Hazel stopped by my desk with coffee. How's Emma? She would ask. I began to notice changes in her too. Her hair was often looser now, her voice gentler, her presence less intimidating. One evening, long after everyone else had gone home, Hazel paused beside my desk. You should leave, she said softly. Emma will be waiting. I saved my work, grateful in ways I couldn't quite express. As I walked to my car that night, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to consider before. What had started as an awkward accident had grown into something quieter, deeper. Something neither of us had planned. The weeks that followed settled into a quiet rhythm I hadn't known. I was missing. Life didn't suddenly become easy. Emma still had homework meltdowns, mornings were still rushed, and work deadlines didn't magically disappear. But something had shifted beneath the surface, something steady and grounding. Hazel became part of that rhythm without either of us naming it. She didn't hover, she didn't pry, but she noticed if I looked exhausted. She sent me home early. If Emma had a school event, Hazel made sure my schedule allowed it. If I stayed late finishing a project, she appeared with coffee and a simple question. How's Emma doing? It never felt intrusive, it felt caring, and that scared me more than I wanted to admit. I hadn't let myself think about romance in years. There was no room for it between school lunches and client deadlines. Love felt like a luxury I couldn't afford, something fragile that could disrupt the careful balance Emma and I had built. But Hazel didn't feel like disruption. She felt like understanding. 2 months after the beach, Horizon hosted a small company gathering in the park. Families were invited. I almost didn't go. Social events drained me, and mixing work with personal life still felt risky. Emma made the decision for me. Hazel will be there, she said confidently while tying her shoes. She promised to help me with games. When we arrived, Hazel spotted us immediately. Her face lit up in a way that made my chest tighten unexpectedly. Emma ran to her without hesitation. "You came," Hazel said, crouching to Emma's level. "Of course," Emma replied. "You said you would." Watching them together, I felt something unfamiliar bloom in my chest. Not jealousy, not fear. Hope. Hazel stayed close throughout the afternoon. She didn't cling, didn't overstep, but she was present. When Emma tugged at her hand, Hazel followed. When Emma needed space, Hazel gave it. At one point, Emma fell asleep on a picnic blanket, her head resting against my leg. Hazel sat beside me, her shoulder brushing mine. "She trusts you completely," Hazel said softly. The words stayed with me. As the sun dipped lower, Hazel helped me lift Emma carefully. "You're doing an incredible job," she said quietly. I swallowed. Praise like that felt heavy, meaningful. "Thank you," I said. "That means more than you know." That night, after I tucked Emma into bed, I stood alone in the kitchen, staring at nothing. Hazel's presence lingered in my thoughts longer than I expected. I realized then that I was already falling, slowly, carefully, quietly, and that terrified me. Another month passed. One evening, Hazel stopped by my desk after everyone else had gone home. "You should leave," she said gently. "Emma will be waiting." "Mrs. Thompson stays with her until 8, I replied. "I'm finishing the Westfield mock-ups." Hazel studied my screen. "They're good. They'll still be good tomorrow." I hesitated, then saved my work. As we walked toward the elevator together, silence stretched between us, not awkward, but charged. "Samuel," Hazel said suddenly, "can I ask you something personal?" I nodded. Double quotes. "Do you ever feel like you're afraid of wanting more?" The question hit deeper than I expected. "Yes," I admitted. "All the time." She exhaled slowly. "Me too." We stood there, the unspoken heavy between us. A week later, Hazel invited Emma and me to Clearwater Beach. Emma was thrilled. When we arrived, the air felt different, familiar, but charged with memory. Emma ran ahead, already building another sandcastle, as if no time had passed at all. Hazel stood beside me, her arms folded loosely. "I've been thinking about that day," she said, "about how something so awkward opened a door I didn't know existed." I smiled faintly. "Me too." Emma called for us to help, and we joined her, laughing as waves crept closer to her carefully built walls. As the sun dipped low, Emma wandered off to collect shells, leaving Hazel and me alone. "I don't do this well," Hazel said quietly, letting people close. "I learned early that control felt safer than connection." "I understand," I replied. I learned that protecting Emma meant protecting myself too. She looked at me then, really looked at me. "I don't want to cross a line," she said, "but I don't want to pretend this isn't happening either." My heart pounded. "I don't want to pretend," I said honestly, "but Emma comes first. Always." Hazel nodded. I wouldn't expect anything less. She reached for my hand slowly, giving me time to pull away. I didn't. Our fingers intertwined, tentative at first, then certain. Emma ran back toward us, smiling. "I made another castle," she announced proudly. Hazel squeezed my hand gently before letting go. 6 months later, life looked different. Hazel was still my boss, still brilliant, still demanding, but she was also someone who sat at our dinner table sometimes, helping Emma with homework. Someone who listened, someone who showed up. One evening, as we walked along the beach again, Emma ran ahead, already calling for us to hurry. Hazel's hand brushed mine. Then stayed. "I used to think happiness was a distraction," Hazel admitted softly. "Now I think it might be balance." I smiled. "I think it's courage." She laughed quietly and laced her fingers with mine. "Sometimes life's most embarrassing moments don't end in shame. Sometimes they open doors, and sometimes the family you build together becomes stronger than the one you thought you lost." Emma waved at us from her sand, calling for help. As we joined her on the sand, Hazel met my gaze, and I saw in her eyes everything I felt. Gratitude. Hope. Sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with an awkward glance. And sometimes they lead exactly where you were meant to be.